Hi everyone, I am John Reinhardt Wacay, and today we will discuss ethics of communication. What is ethics of communication? To further understand this lesson, we have two topics to be discussed: ethical communication and the code of ethics. First, we have ethical communication. What is ethical communication? Before we proceed, let us first define the key terms, which are ethics and communication. Ethics: the discipline dealing with what is good and bad and with moral duty and obligation. In other words, ethics refers to the moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. These moral principles are the principles of right and wrong that are accepted by an individual or a social group. Examples of these common morals are: always tell the truth, have courage, do not cheat, keep your promises, have integrity, be loyal, and many more. Communication is a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. That is according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary. In simple terms, this refers to the transfer of idea or information from one person to another. Communication could be done through verbal or non-verbal ways. Now that we already know the meaning of those key terms, let us define ethical communication. Ethical communication. Ethical communication is a type of communication that is predicated upon certain business values, such as being truthful, concise, and responsible with one's words and the resulting actions. Ethical communication encompasses being honest in all communications, keeping confidential information confidential, and not discussing the personal or business situations of others in public or in front of a third party. As a set of principles, ethical communication understands that one's thoughts must be conveyed and expressed effectively and concisely, and that the resulting actions or consequences will be based solely on how the message was communicated. To be an ethical communicator means to practice being truthful, honest, and accurate in communications. Ethical communication entails the accepting and understanding of three key elements: what one hopes to achieve through communication, how one chooses to communicate, and the real-world outcomes of communication are particularly important features of ethical communication, according to Sage 2009. Now that you have learned what ethical communication is, let us discuss the fundamentals of ethical communication. When we speak of the word fundamental, this refers to the central or primary rule or principle on which something is based. The first one is responsible thinking. This means teaching people how to think on their own and create their own effective plans rather than someone else doing thinking for them. Decision making. This refers to the process of identifying and choosing alternatives based on the values, preferences, and beliefs of the decision maker. Development of relationships and communities. One of the most profound experiences we can have in our lives is the connection we have with other human beings. Positive and supportive relationships will help us to feel healthier, happier, and more satisfied with our lives. Before we proceed, if there's ethical communication, there's also unethical communication. What is this unethical communication? Communication used to undermine relationships or encourage social immorality is unethical communication. Unethical behavior has serious consequences for both individuals and organizations. You can lose your job and reputation. Organizations can lose their credibility. General morale and productivity can decline. Next, we have the principles of ethical communication. A while ago, I've mentioned the word principle. Now we will discuss these principles one by one. The first principle of ethical communication is to advocate truthfulness, accuracy, honesty, and reason as essential to the integrity of communication. Being an ethical communicator means being an effective communicator. In order to become an effective communicator, one must convey genuine ideas and accurate and honest to every word he or she says. Endorse freedom of expression, diversity of perspective, and tolerance of dissent to achieve the informed and responsible decision making fundamental to a civil society. This means every person should advocate freedom of expression, meaning each person has the right to express himself or herself. Diversity of perspective, meaning each individual person has different perspective on things, and tolerance of dissent means being able to tolerate opinions that are different from those previously commonly or officially held. Strive to understand and respect other communicators before evaluating and responding to their messages. Right before responding, a person must try to understand the idea that the person he or she is talking to is trying to convey, and that he or she must respond without disrespecting the person he or she is communicating with. Promote access to communication resources and opportunities as necessary to fulfill human potential and contribute to the well-being of families, communities, and society. Each individual person must have the access to the different communication resources and opportunities so that he or she would be able to fulfill his or her potential and contribute to the well-being of people around him or her. Promote communication climates of caring and mutual understanding that respect the unique needs and characteristics of individual communicators. In order to be an ethical communicator, there should be mutual understanding between the communicators, and each of them should make the person they're trying to communicate with feel that they are heard, that they are valued, because each of us has our own unique needs and characteristics as communicators. Condemn communication that degrades individuals and humanity through distortion, intimidation, coercion, and violence, and through the expression of intolerance and hatred. This simply means promoting humanity in communication. One should not entertain communication that could regard someone with contempt or disrespect. Respect is very important in communication. Without it, problems which are needed to be solved will not be solved, since there is no respect between each party, which could eventually lead to worse situations. Being committed to the courageous expression of personal convictions in pursuit of fairness and justice. An individual must have the courage of expressing his or her ideas or thoughts for as long as it is fair and just. Advocate sharing information, opinions, and feelings when facing significant choices, while also respecting privacy and confidentiality. When communicating, one must put into their minds that there are things that are best kept in private, or things that are not supposed to be shared with other people. Before sharing information with other people, one must think of it thoroughly. Lastly, accept responsibility for the short and long-term consequences for our own communication and expect the same for others. Remember that you have to be responsible of every action you made. Before doing or saying something, it is best that you should evaluate it first. How will it impact you as a speaker, and what are the possible outcomes of these actions? The same should be observed with other speakers. Whatever outcome of the action, you must take full responsibility of it and not blame it to someone else. Remember these principles, because this would make you a better communicator. Now, we will proceed to the ethical frameworks. An ethical framework is a set of codes that an individual uses to guide his or her behavior. Here are some examples of this framework. First, we have utilitarian approach. Focuses on the results and whether or not it would benefit the majority. Utilitarianism focuses on the consequences of each action or decision. This approach has something to do with the greater good. One must identify what would be the possible effects of his or her actions before doing them, not just to the people he's communicating with, but to everyone. Virtue approach. Concerned with moral character and places more weight or value on the dignity of an individual and the humanity's task of caring for one another. It emphasizes character as opposed to duty or consequence. Basically, this approach is based on morals and values. Before saying something, one must ask himself or herself if what he or she is about to say is good or bad for the person he or she is trying to talk to, and if it does not degrade someone's reputation. Situational or contextual approach. There is no absolute approach to these situations. Each situation should be addressed as different from each other. Every problem should be evaluated in its particular context or situation. Simply, each situation or problem has its own solution. One must first evaluate the situation in order to come up with a more suitable solution to it. There are different forms of communication, so one must evaluate first the situation before responding so that the purpose of communication will be achieved.
Hi everyone, I am Nelly Macy, and now let's proceed to our second topic, which is the Code of Ethics. What is the Code of Ethics? The Code of Ethics is a guide of principles designed to help professionals conduct business honestly and with integrity. Code of Ethics, simply known as the basis of how we do things in an honest and integrative way. The Code of Ethics, also referred as an ethical code. Ethical codes are adopted by organizations to assist members in understanding the difference between right and wrong and in applying the understanding to their decisions. In other words, ethical code is on how we differentiate what is right from wrong involving our decisions. Here are some of the Communication Code of Ethics. The first one is what we call openness and dialogue. Openness and dialogue explicitly discloses the involvement of an employer or a client in the content of a message or publication pertaining to them, openly discloses his or her pertinent interests, ties, and obligations. According to Merriam-Webster, openness is willing to hear and consider or to accept and deal with. You do not enclose or confine a barrier. You considered what is he or she says all about. The second one is honesty. Professional, efficacious communication is always truthful. The communication professional distinguishes views and opinions from factual claims, does not make claims that he or she knows are erroneous, does not make true claims in a manner that gives a misleading impression, corrects a claim that turns out to be erroneous. Always remember that truthfulness is a must in every communication you may encounter. You need to be real in order to have a successful communication. Third one is reliability. Trust is the foundation of functioning stakeholder relations. The communication professionals always act in accordance with the interests of an employer or a client, enhances the reliability of an employer or a client in all circumstances, utilizes confidential information concerning an employer or a client only in ways mutually agreed upon. It means when you develop trust in every communication you had, everything became reliable because they see or they feel you're a trustworthy person. Last one is respectfulness. Professionalism entails the development of skills and the ability to show respect towards members of one's own and other professions. Respect is very important in making a communication because your attitude defines you. What you hear or read are just some of the Communication Code of Ethics. Watch the video played next showing how Communication Code of Ethics take action.
The principles of the Code of Ethics are connected, yet when applying them in some cases, finding the right balance may be difficult. Let's look at this scenario where Myra, a registered dietitian, counsels her client, Kim. Kim is interested in a controversial diet. She shares some of her research with Myra. It's from both credible and less credible sources. Overall, there's mixed scientific evidence for the diet, and there may be some risk. Given the information available, Myra is not sure how to help Kim. Myra is conflicted. On the one hand, respect for autonomy requires Myra to be open to client input and accept her client's choice to pursue a specific treatment. On the other hand, beneficence requires her to take an evidence-based approach, even though there is not much data to go on. The lack of information also compromises her ability to uphold the principle of non-maleficence, identifying potential harm and avoiding risk. Knowing that demonstrating professionalism when caring for a client is the foundation of the client-dietitian relationship, Myra reflects on the situation. She examines her own biases, conducts additional research, and consults with colleagues. Myra knows that dietitians have an ethical obligation to base communication on constructive dialogue and civility. She knows that a professional relationship should be based on trust, dignity, and care. By being open-minded and discussing the risks and benefits of the diet with Kim, Myra demonstrates a caring attitude. This enables Kim and Myra to work together on a path forward based on mutual respect. For guidance on applying the principles of the Code of Ethics in your own dietetic practice, contact the College of Dietitians of Ontario. We're here to help.